Welcome to the Ask the Geographer podcast series, brought to you by the Education Department at the Royal Geographical Society with IBG. I'm Rachel, your host, and in each episode I'll be joined by geographers from across the globe to delve into current events, publications and research, all tied to the fascinating world of geography. Today I am joined by Dr. Jessica Tipton and Richard Irvine. Jess is the head of the National Education Nature Park based at the Natural History Museum, and Richard is the Nature Park's Senior Programme Officer for the South West based in the Royal Horticultural Society. Richard, Jess, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for having us. Great to be here.
So Jess, as the head of the National Education Nature Park, please can you give us an overview of the aims of the Nature Park?
Of course, yeah. As I say, brilliant to be here and talk about the Nature Park. I don't know how much people listening have already heard about it or totally new to it, but we will assume that you haven't heard about Nature Park yet. So it's all about getting young people with their teachers from schools, nurseries and colleges across England out exploring their grounds, however large or small, however grey or green they might be, and finding out what biodiversity, what habitats are out there, and then working together to boost that nature on that site. And then they're also taking part in a big programme that's across the country, so that all adds up at a national scale. And education estates are estimated to be over twice the size of Birmingham. So a really big site there across the country. And they are part of a globally trailblazing research project working with Natural History Museum scientists. The students involved are feeling empowered to take action to help the planet. And by doing that, they're improving their physical, their mental health, and they're developing skills for the future. And we're getting climate and nature into the heart of the curriculum. So lots going on there. We can talk a bit more about it in more detail as we go.
Thank you. I think you've covered quite a few things there, particularly some of the major achievements. But if just for you, what are the achievements to date, in your opinion?
So, good question. We're into the second year of the programme now, so we're about halfway through. So, really exciting time. We've launched. We've completed a whole academic year cycle, and now we're also planning for the next 2 years of the programme. So just to say a little bit more about how the programme is set up, and then I'll come on to how it's going so far. So it's a really ambitious project, this. It's not been done before. There aren't, to our knowledge, other countries doing something quite like this. It's a big partnership. So it's commissioned by Department for Education. So funding's coming from government, and then the Natural History Museum, where I'm based, is the lead organisation. And then we've got a brilliant partnership with Royal Horticultural Society, where Richard's from, and yourselves, Royal Geographical Society, are hosts today. And then we've got the GIS company, Esri UK, which I know is familiar to a lot of geographers and geography teachers. And there's all sorts of other organisations leading in their field. And if you go to our website, educationnaturepark.org.uk, I'm sure we'll share that in the notes, you can see all the other members of the partnership. So this is, so as I said, an ambitious programme, lots of collaboration, lots of bringing all that expertise, experience together. And it's extraordinary how well we're all working together. So we've got a big team across those organisations, as I say. And I'm just going to say a little bit more about the setup, and because I think need a bit more context as well. So this was commissioned by Department for Education as part of its sustainability and climate strategy. So that was launched at COP26 in Glasgow 2021. I did happen to be there with a group of students, actually. I'll come back to that. That was part of my previous role. And we are we call ourselves a sisterhood of other projects that the DFE commissioned or supports. So we've got Nature Park, we launched first. We've got the Climate Ambassadors Programme. We've got a website, Sustainability Support for Education website, to help teachers find resources. And then we've got Let's Go Zero also we're working alongside. And then we've got on Nature Park loads of teaching resources from lots of other organisations, because there's obviously loads been working on this for years, decades, longer, on climate and nature education. So we're trying to bring that all together, not reinvent the wheel. And so taking part in Nature Park and all these other programmes helps a setting do its climate action plan. And this year is all about schools doing their climate action planning. So we're part of that wider ecosystem, if you like.
How does your work on the National Education Nature Park fit in with your work to date and wider aims?
So I've got quite I think it's called a portfolio career, and I've done quite a few things. They do all link together in a way, but it might not be obvious. So I've done research on Russia and climate, because my background is a linguist, my sort of academic background. So at that point, I managed to get Russia and environment together. That was great. And then I worked on and off at DEFRA, Department for Environment, for about 10 years on all sorts of different policy areas. So sustainable farming, marine bill, climate adaptation and agriculture, EU and international. I moved around a lot. I then went into languages teaching, and while doing that, I set up the UK Schools Sustainability Network, which is to bring together students and staff working on sustainability in whatever school may be feeling a bit alone and wanted a network to share with and do projects with. And that's why I went to COP26 with a bunch of teenagers who'd never met before, and they were getting into the blue zone and the green zone and at COP. So I felt like Nature Park seemed like a good natural next step to try and bring all this together, as at that point I think a real opportunity for climate and nature in education to become mainstream, because this is commissioned by Department for Education, and that gives the authority the levels of support needed to try and get this in, ideally all settings. So perfect way to get out of this is my little phrase, the echo chamber. And then we've got this brilliant partnership, the museum, RHS, yourselves and others, Esri, which really gives clout and brings expertise. It's a sort of dream group of organisations, which I think is why we've had such good traction already.
Fantastic. I think you've highlighted quite a lot of the things that have already happened. So just looking to the future, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to seeing develop within the Nature Park?
Because of this big partnership and the innovative nature of the programme, it keeps evolving all the time. And it's sort of got, in a good way, a mind of its own because of all the people involved. So part of the beauty of it is that we don't necessarily know what will happen in the final couple of years of the programme, because we keep responding to teacher needs, to what Richard and others are passing on from the regions, what's going on in wider society or with nature. So part of what's exciting is, depending on what data is collected as well, this could go different ways. So that's fun to see what will be suggested and what will happen. That said, we obviously do have plans set out. Something that I'm quite excited about is we are working on a tailored package for early years, so that really little children can get involved in this in a way that suits their setting. So there's that. We're also going to look at the SEND resources and engagement, which is a big project because such diverse needs there. So lots more kind of tailoring will be happening in the next couple of years. The collaboration with the sister projects is going really well now they're set up. So we're now joining up on our communications, particularly on the climate action plans work. So that should help get the word out, and it brings, again, more expertise in. On the website, do have a look at the resource library. You'll see there's already a lot there for a lot of different subjects. We will be developing that but ensuring there's always quality assurance and it's not an overwhelming amount of resources. So that's exciting. We've been talking to other government departments a lot lately. They're interested in all the different benefits of the project. But I think probably the biggest thing I'm looking forward to is what the pupils discover on their sites. So what nature's there, what might be there from putting in a pond or a green wall, and how that all adds up. And then all our scientists looking and trying to predict what the gains will be in the short term, and then trying to predict even longer term. And that gives everybody tangible hope, which is something obviously everybody needs right now, particularly young people.
Fantastic. So the Nature Park offers a unique opportunity for geography teachers specifically and their pupils. For anyone listening or is already registered and involved, what would your advice be to keep the momentum going in the classroom?
If you've already registered, that's brilliant. Thank you. And if you've done your site boundary, that's getting the green glowy dot on the map, so you're part of this science project. That's brilliant. That's the next step. And then what we're focusing on now is the need for doing the habitat mapping, so getting the baseline. So you may or may not have done that yet. It does require a bit of planning, a bit of thinking through how to involve different students, brilliant learning activity. And once it's done, it's done. You've got your baseline. So that's the kind of second important thing to do. And if you go on our website, you'll see there's a 5-step cycle or process. The fact it's a cycle is important because it keeps going. So Nature Park is never done is one of our little mottos. So you'll see there's getting to know your space, identifying opportunities, making decisions, making change happen, and recording change. That's the 5 steps. And you can keep coming back to those, involving different groups. If you've had a cohort left, might be about getting younger ones involved. If it's been your eco club or geography club, or gardening club, that's fantastic. Maybe now you can try it with some other groups, get it into PSHE tutor time. So trying to get that whole school approach, which we're really after, so it's not kind of siloed in a smaller group who are already interested in this sort of thing, maybe. And then you can see lots of things on the website. So I mentioned case studies, blogs about what other schools have been doing. You might get a few ideas from that. And then, as I mentioned, the resources. So alongside Nature Park and boosting biodiversity, it's in our remit from the DFE to produce climate and nature resources for all key stages across subjects. So whatever your subject, I'm presuming most people here are geographers, but do spread the word to other teachers and non-teaching staff as well. There's so much there for getting this into curriculum time, form time, clubs, breakfast clubs. We've been talking about that lately. There should be something for everybody, and we will keep adding.
Wonderful. And then on the flip side, for anyone who hasn't registered, what would you encourage them to do next or look out for?
So if you haven't heard already, we have a website. So that's our main window, if you like. That's the way to find out about Nature Park, as well as what Rich will talk about. We have the regional teams and sister projects on the ground, but the website has everything there. So very important to go and register your setting. So you need to find your setting. There's like URN, unique reference number for your setting, should be there. And any education setting with a URN in England can register and then access these digital tools, do the habitat mapping, as I mentioned. However, if you're from outside of formal education or you're just interested, anyone can access everything else on the website. The vast majority of resources anyone can find, and you can register as a non-education user as well. So that's registration, first thing. And then you will be getting newsletters, relevant emails, depending on where you're at on your journey, and reminders about things like the site boundary, without which you're not part of the science project. So that is really important for you and your pupils. So it might depend on your role in the school. We've got resources to try and spread the word. So like assembly, slide packs, letters to SLT or governors or parents. So that, because I think it's really important that it's not just you, but you get other staff on board, and that will help with obviously continuity and support for you and mainstream it. And then, as I said, you can reach out to our regional teams in all 9 English regions. You can reach out and find a climate ambassador through the sister project. You can look at the other website that has lots of resources on. So it depends where you're at on your journey, what you're interested in. But this is the year of drawing up your climate action plan and having a sustainability lead in your setting. That's what DFE are asking everybody to do.
Fantastic. I think you've talked quite a lot about this within the main body of your answers, but in a nutshell for you, and the final question for you for the moment is, why is it important for young people and their teachers to take part in the nature park? What are you selling? Why is it important?
Yes, it's hard to be concise, especially when you've got so much in your head about how brilliant this project is. I think for me, and this is why I came to work on this, is that this is a really rigorous, thoughtful, evidence-based programme put together by a brilliant partnership, authoritative organisations, excellent people. And so you know that there is quality assurance. And also this is a long-term project as well, which is obviously really important for educators to know that they can rely on this. And it's also you're part of a nationwide science project. So you and your pupils are part of something bigger. So you might be making little changes on your site, but it adds up. And I think psychologically that's really important. We have heard that this is really exciting for staff who may be looking for something new to do in their setting. You know, obviously particularly geographers, scientists, but this does go across all different disciplines. So there's lots of kind of staff opportunities there. It's a great way to bring the community together, something that you can get lots of different people involved in. And it's a positive programme. So obviously climate, nature crises, difficult things to talk about, you know, a lot of research into eco-anxiety in young people and older people. So this is a good way to address that it's scientific and positive. And then there's all the skills that pupils will develop. So we've got them all set out on the website, but there's decision making, creativity, leadership, data science, environmental stewardship, all those skills they are going to need for the future, whatever they do. Doesn't matter what vocation, subjects, career interests they have, they need to be prepared, and this will help along with lots of other things they do at school.
Jess, thank you very much. Richard, over to you. Please could you tell us about the work of the regional team and why the RHS wanted to be involved in this project?
Okay, well, Jess already mentioned we work in the 9 English government regions, and 7 of those are staffed by staff from the Royal Horticultural Society, and 2 East and West Midlands by Learning Through Landscapes, which is the National School Grounds charity, who are really good partners to have on board and have helped us with some training as well to their specialisms. We've got a senior program officer and a program officer in each region, and we cover a vast area when it comes to travel, especially somewhere like the southwest with pretty poor public transport. Getting around and reaching schools and events is quite a challenge. I've been in post since the start of the year, so my answers are sort of limited to my experience so far, and a lot of that has been to do with the small grants scheme, the Nature Park grants, which I think we had 73 schools. Jess will probably know off the top of her head how many in total, but the schools that were eligible was based on a formula looking at multiple deprivation indices and also access to green space, and those 2 things combined determined who was eligible to apply for £10,000 to enhance biodiversity on their school site. So we focused really strongly on getting as much uptake for that as possible. And I think we've ended up with 81% of schools that were eligible in the Southwest actually applying. So the next part of our job is to help those schools spend that money wisely and on time so that it has the maximum impact. And most, to be honest, are happy to just get on with it and have got a really good plan in place and have it well costed and are going to go and do some interesting things. Alongside that, the next phase, as Jess talked a lot about, is habitat mapping. So the schools that have applied have all done their boundaries. We'd like to increase uptake across the board with non-grant schools and get them started on the mapping process as well. And largely that the sell there is to be part of this national community science project. And I think that excites people when they hear the words Natural History Museum. That excites them as well. There's a kudos, and that's one of the things that attracted me to this job, actually, was the fact that the organisations taking part have got national clout, having worked in environmental education in different sizes of organisations for over 30 years. It was that appeal was one of the things that drew me to this role. And we do a lot of attending events with young people, but also events with multi-academy trusts. And we offer webinars, so on different topics. And at the minute, the next one coming up for us is on the 22nd of this month, focusing on habitat mapping and supporting schools who might not be so comfortable with that. There's another side to it, because we're communicating with teachers and students on a daily, weekly basis, is relaying lots of the feedback that we get from their experiences of Nature Park back to the rest of the partnership, to especially website development. So things that could be tweaked and tuned to make the user experience more friendly and the user journey more logical, but also the teaching and learning stuff. So there might be requests from lots of teachers saying, we'd really like something on the water cycle in school grounds for Key Stage 2. And if we're hearing lots of that, we can pass it on. And then the curriculum resources team can work on things like that. Why the RHS is a good fit? It's the national charity for gardening. Its charitable aims are to improve the science, art and practice of horticulture. And it's been doing that for over 200 years. And I think to do that, it's essentially an educational organisation. I mean, it's got a really strong education background with school visits to the 5 RHS gardens. It's also the national campaign for school gardening, which is having a bit of a revamp at the minute. But I think over 60% of schools and settings in the UK already signed up to the campaign for school gardening. So we've already got that reach. And I think the RHS I've been a member for 22 years before being employed, has had quite a journey in terms of sustainability. And lots of the science going on there is about sustainable gardening and about moving to things like, I think the organisation aims to be peat free in all of its sites and shows by the end of 2025. And it's also had to get into some lobbying as well, because there isn't actually a definition of peat free for people to act upon. So its sustainability credentials are good, its educational credentials are good, and it would seem to work really well with the Natural History Museum and the other partners.
So you highlighted quite a lot in your first introduction there, and obviously we're very aware that you've only been in role for 5 months. So drawing on your understanding and perhaps speaking to colleagues in other regional teams, could you share some of the highlights of the Nature Park's activities that have been undertaken in schools?
I think the first highlight, one of the things that lots of people talk about, and Jess has already mentioned, is the Hidden Nature Challenge. I just loved it. As soon as I heard of it, I love the idea of finding the unusual or the overlooked in the everyday. And young people have got this great experience, intimate knowledge of their school grounds where they spend their break time and their lunch time, but they're not always looking for the nature that lives there as well. So that activity, allowing them to just really go and explore deeply and slowly in a different way than they might use that space, was a real highlight. And I think one of the numbers that I pulled out was that on the 4th of October last year, there were 2,000 interactions with that, 2,000 observations recorded. And my colleagues in the regions verify and moderate those submissions as they come in. And I think people notice when there's a sunny day, the numbers peak, and someone will go, who was doing Hidden Nature Challenge in Manchester this afternoon? Because we've got 70 recordings have just come in. So obviously a class or two had been outside, and it's really nice to just see that as it happens. I think for me, the highlights so far have been interactions with young people. I was at an event on Earth Day on the 22nd of April in Cornwall that was organised by a really cool, it's a youth-led organisation called Another Way. And they had 10 Cornish secondary schools come together for a day of talks and workshops. And we had maps of those particular school sites out, and we were using those to talk to young people about their favourite places, where the places where it was too hot, where it was a bit too windy, places that flooded, places that they thought were good for wildlife, and just seeing their enthusiasm for those places and their ability. Actually, it was impressive and very pleasing as an ex-geography teacher to see how well they could just instantly hone in on the map and recognize where it was, orient it, and put in their own sort of landmarks. And then we used some habitat intervention cards they're on the website. They're a bit like top trumps. So it's hard sometimes to think of ideas for improvement if you don't know what's possible. What are the options? So there are lots of options on those cards, and young people were leafing through them and saying, "Oh, we could put a pond here in this little courtyard space," and then we could have discussions about why or why not that might be the best place to put that particular feature if they wanted one. So there's just sort of that engagement and enthusiasm is a highlight.
We understand that you have a geography-related background.
Yeah.
Could you let our listeners know, why do you think the activities created by the partnerships are useful and relevant to geography teachers?
After I graduated, I started working as a field studies tutor for the FSC, for Field Studies Council in Slaptonley. And I then I did that for a few years, and then I taught in secondary for 5 years. And since then, I've been exclusively outside. But I think those two jobs informed the rest of my environmental ed portfolio career. And I think the thing that I really like, that I think the Nature Park has to offer geography teachers, is that it was partly the opportunity for on-site field work that's directly relevant. As I mentioned before, young people are invested in their school grounds where they spend a lot of time, using that space that they're already invested in as a space to explore and develop geographical skills with a purpose. And the purpose is that contribution to community science, but also to making change. And the making change bit also, this is multifaceted. Doing something positive can help alleviate that feeling of climate anxiety, not just with the young people, but with the teachers who are instigating it. So yeah, using the school grounds as a lab is one of the things. And there are lots of resources there that, on topics that will be very familiar to geography teachers, but they're not necessarily applied to the school site. So things like weather and microclimate, but looking at microclimates and thinking about climate change adaptation. And it's just too hot to have our lunch outside here anymore. There's no trees. Where are we going to plant a tree? What's a good tree going to be? How are we going to find out? It generates a lot of questions that can be topics for geographical inquiry. So I think that's one thing. There are lots of specific topics. I mentioned the weather and climate one, which uses story maps from Esri. And again, looking beyond that pupil school grounds, they can see what's going on in other schools in the rest of the country. And I think a really exciting thing that's coming up is the Atlas of Nature Park data. So as students are more familiar with and they contribute more data, they'll be able to see that on a national scale and interact with it with other layers of data, like soil types, areas that are prone to flooding. And it's a gateway into GIS that's really relatable and relevant, rather than abstract concepts of something that might be quite difficult to get across.
Getting pupils to engage with nature and spend time outdoors is the underlying aim of the Nature Park. Having opened their eyes to the possibilities of the future that this might present, can you share with us any green careers that might be of interest to them?
Obvious ones from an RHS point of view are land-based careers, especially in horticulture and cultivating plants. There's a really good project that's not Nature Park, but it's aligned, called New Shoots, which is an RHS initiative to increase sort of diversity and uptake of people undertaking horticultural careers, and also to sort of bust that myth that they are mainly about the labour of wheeling soil around and digging, and that actually they're, degree level careers where the gardeners that I meet on a daily basis have a huge amount of knowledge about not just plants, but their growing environment and the place that they're in. And we're actually working with New Shoots on, if any of listeners are going to the Big Bang STEM Fair at the NEC in June, we are going to have a green careers area there where Nature Park will have a big presence alongside the RHS New Shoots team and lots of other organisations doing other relevant things. From the geography point of view, there are all the obvious things. There's a big focus in the Nature Park on the use of technology. And so those skills of data collection and analysis and presentation fitting into modelling careers, data modelling careers. One interesting thing I saw in a school visit to support a grant school was an eco club turning up after school when we were having a meeting with the contractors, some landscape gardeners, about how they could dig up about 25 square meters of tarmac to solve a drainage problem and put in planters and create a pollination larder, I think it was described as, and seeing those year nines, interacting with these contractors, and then also looking at us and going, so what's your job then? Why are you here? And us having the chance to talk about environmental education and what degrees we'd done. And my colleague did design and sort of how that fits in. So there is no shortage of opportunities to highlight those green careers. And I know the RGS have a couple of posters that show lots of different possibilities of what you could do with a geographical education and how you could take that into future careers. There's also some videos accompanying that with case studies of people talking about their career path to get to the job that they've done.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe to the Ask the Geographer podcast series on soundcloud.com or your preferred streaming platform. Dive deeper into the world of geography and stay informed with our wide range of resources, many of which are available for free. School membership grants access to even more resources, including online lectures and supporting materials for both teachers and learners. Explore our resources and discover our additional offers for education at www.rgs.org/schools.